the Beltline Transit Study. We're going to give folks a little time as I see the room is filling in at this time. So just bear with us for a moment. Attendees are growing. We're pushing 40 at this point. I'm going to take a moment in the interest of time to share a little bit about the slide that's on your screen. You all registered for this event. We want you to understand why we're collecting this demographic information, and that's to meet a promise of a Beltline for all. We collect this information from all of our participants that are on the Zoom platform. The information is strictly used for internal research purposes to assist us in guiding outreach and public engagement efforts, and we will not distribute this to other organizations. We're going to wait another minute or so, and then we're going to get started. All right, looks like we're live on Facebook. We have about 51 attendees in the room. Let's get this event started. So I want to wish everyone a good evening. I hope you guys are home safe. We decided to continue on with tonight. We were watching the weather closely. We felt like the winds weren't going to pick up until later. And with the virtual environment, we wouldn't really want to hold back on this subject any further. You're here tonight for a citywide conversation regarding a study that the Atlanta Beltline Inc. organization is taking on called the Beltline Transit Study. We want to thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Nathan Soldat. I'm the Director of Community Engagement for Atlanta Beltline Inc., or ABI, and we're the organization really responsible for implementing the vision of the Atlanta Beltline. We have enabled live transcription, and if you'd like to view this option, please click live transcript at the bottom of your screen. This will allow you to select your preferences. So let's just talk about the format and the agenda for tonight. We're up to 61 attendees on Zoom. We have additional participants on Facebook Live. If you are watching the Zoom platform or Facebook Live, you can follow the agenda along the bottom of the slide. If you're listening by phone, I will take just a second to walk you through the agenda at this point. So we've started with some welcome, some logistics. We're going to follow this with a little bit of audience polling to warm you all up and get a sense of the room. And then we're going to do a quick Beltline 101 to ground us. After that, we're going to use the meat of our time to focus on the Beltline Transit Study. Little housekeeping here. We kindly ask that you do not place questions in the Q&A box until we get to that portion of the agenda. We actually have two sections for questions, and it'll be clear when we get to that point. We wanted to break up some of this heavier material. If you do place a question in the Q&A box prior to one of those sections, we will dismiss it, but you will be able to retrieve it and put it back in there. The idea is that we want everyone to have an opportunity to hear the presentation without distractions. Additionally, many times questions are being answered in the presentation as we go. If you are noticing at this point that your line is muted and your video screen is turned off, that is again to provide the best listening experience for everyone online. Recording of this meeting, the presentation, and any other supporting materials will be made available online at beltline.org/meetings in the coming days or week. If you have any technical difficulties during the meeting, please email engage@atlbeltline.org. And should we have any difficulties with the weather, we appreciate your patience. We intend to sort them out. We do have several backup plans to keep the meeting flowing. We're up to 84 attendees. So I don't want to take too much of tonight on this opening, if you will, but we do want to get a sense of the virtual room. So we're going to go ahead and ask you all a few questions. As we start the poll, you should see a question pop up on your screen. This feature is not available if you have called in or you're on Facebook Live. But if you're on Facebook Live, you can certainly put your comments in the comment section of Facebook Live, and I will read the results to the group. So the first question is, what neighborhood do you live in? And since this is a citywide conversation, we got a little broad. We have Northeast Atlanta Beltline neighborhood in Southeast Atlanta, Beltline neighborhood in Southwest Atlanta, Beltline neighborhood in Northwest Atlanta. Maybe you're in a neighborhood in the city of Atlanta that's not on this list, or a neighborhood outside the city of Atlanta. And we're up to about 88 attendees. with pretty good participation. Let's go ahead and lock that one in. We're getting like 85, 90% participation. So we have representation really from everywhere, with the strongest in order northeast to southeast to southwest to northwest. In terms of Beltline neighborhoods, and we have representation in the city and beyond. Next polling question, which is, how long have you lived in your neighborhood? Buckets include 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, 11 plus years. And you guys are very, very quick on these responses. I appreciate it. We're already at about 80% participation out of 90 attendees. We'll go ahead and lock that in. We have 58% of our group 1 to 5 years, 16% 6 to 10 years, and 25% 11 or more years. Tell us about your relationship to the Atlanta Beltline. Now, this one's going to be a multiple choice. Going to be a little long-winded here, but I want folks who may have called in to understand the kinds of questions we're asking. Are you a trail user, a homeowner in a Beltline neighborhood, a renter in a Beltline neighborhood, a residential landlord in a Beltline neighborhood, a business owner or a commercial landlord in a Beltline neighborhood, a developer, a real estate broker, a community activist and or advocate, or are you just generally interested in the Beltline project as a whole? So this takes a little more time. You're making multiple choices. There's lots of choices. Pick 1 or 2 or 3 that suit you best. Obviously, the numbers won't add up with multiple choice. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and kind of highlight the top choices here. So we'll go ahead and close that out at about a 78%, 79% participation rate. And we have a lot of trail users and homeowners. We have some renters, residential landlords, business owners, a developer or two, a real estate broker, a strong showing for community activists and advocates, and quite a bit of general interest in the Beltline project. Next question. When you're on the Beltline, what are you most likely to be doing? Again, multiple choice. We got the hang of that by now. Exercising, recreation, running errands, getting to work or school, so transportation basically, engaging in leisure activities, or perhaps you don't use a trail at this time. And we have 103 participants. The number keeps on growing. What a strong showing. 82%, let's lock it in. We have a couple folks who don't use the trail. We have exercising, recreation, leisure activities. We also have folks running errands, getting to work and school, and using the Beltline for one of its primary functions, which is transportation and getting around the city. Last question, okay? And then we're going to get into our Beltline 101. Just tell us, let us know, is this your first in-person or virtual or hybrid Beltline meeting? We've been doing these meetings since 2005. $105 attendees, 83% participation. Let's lock it in. All right. 62 people said it's not their first meeting. Welcome back. We appreciate you guys continuing to engage in the project, and we welcome the 25 people who said that they have never been to a Beltline meeting, and that's fantastic. Welcome to our Beltline Transit Study meeting. For that reason, and to make sure we're all on the same page, I'm going to take an hour-long presentation on the Beltline 101 and condense it to a couple minutes at most. So folks come to the Beltline from a lot of different perspectives. Perhaps you're a trail user. Maybe you supported the original transit vision. Perhaps you're passionate about affordable housing, or you've been a part of being one of our arts and culture artists or consumers of art, if you will. But there's a lot of aspects, as you can see on the screen, to this project. At the end of the day, the Beltline really is a project about reconnecting communities that were historically disconnected from infrastructure. And in this case, that infrastructure was, for the most part, freight railroad. When you stitch the Beltline together, it's about a 22-mile loop around the city, containing Midtown and downtown. We're taking that old railroad structure, infrastructure, in most cases, no longer active, not always, and we're repurposing it. So at the core, this, as I mentioned, is a transit project, a 22-mile light rail streetcar transit project connecting into the different MARTA heavy rail and bus system access points, complementing that with what a lot of folks know to be the 22-mile loop trail, of which we will be, roughly 18 miles in by the World Cup summer 2026. we're connecting a lot of things. I mentioned communities, neighborhoods that have been disconnected by that. But we're also connecting 1,300 acres of new green space. We have a series of trail connections connecting into the Beltline. We are building and will likely exceed 5,600 units of affordable workforce housing. We have a goal of $10 billion in economic development, 48,000 construction jobs, those are one-year jobs, and 50,000 permanent jobs. We are tracking well on all those numbers. I mentioned public art. We have one of the largest public art programs in the Southeast. Our artists are paid. All the art is free for our public. Really exciting. We're cleaning up as we go. Freight railroad corridor, not always the cleanest place to start, with a lot of industrial uses that are being repurposed. What you're experiencing tonight is one of the main things that we do around all these different sort of hard infrastructure things is that we have conversations with our community. This is one of our many community engagement meetings where we're working on collaborating on planning, designing, or constructing the Beltline. But I think most important, and you can see that in the top left-hand part of your screen, is that we do this work not in a vacuum, but through the lens of equity and inclusion. So you can see that reflected in our vision statement, which is to be the catalyst for making Atlanta a global beacon for equitable, inclusive, and sustainable city life. All of these projects together make the Beltline more than just a trail project. This is a complete rethinking of the city. I'm glad that I had a chance to share the 101 with you, but at this time, it is my true pleasure to hand things over to our principal engineer and also the project manager for the Beltline Transit Study, Mr. Sean Green.
Thanks, Nate. Appreciate you, buddy. Hey, good evening, everybody. Sean Green here, principal engineer for Atlanta Beltline and project manager for this Beltline Transit Study. This is a $3.5 million study funded at an 80% split with federal money from the Federal Transit Administration. It's all planning money with a specific scope for us to take a look at 3/4 of the Beltline. I'll get more into details on that if we can hit the next slide, please. So overall, the intention of the Beltline is that of connectivity. It's of making sure that people all over the city can get all over the city with as much ease and with as much access as possible. So trying to right some historic wrongs, but making sure that as we move this thing forward, that we have a transit network that expands, that we have a trail network that expands and reaches not just the Beltline, but out into the city, inside the Beltline and out. Next slide, please. So as I started to allude to, we're looking at about 3/4 of the Beltline. So at the top of the page here, you can see Lindbergh area. And then as you go in the northeast, as you go clockwise around, in the northeast, there's already been some analysis performed by MARTA just about 2 years ago at this point. And so the purpose of this study is to tack on to the work that MARTA has done and finish the loop out. So generally speaking, from Glenwood Avenue and Glenwood Park, roughly around I-20 on the southeast study area there, and then continuing around about 13 miles, all the way back and around, so the southeast through the southwest, and then up into the northwest to get back up towards Lindbergh. And that's our study area that we're looking at, about 13 miles. And you can see, our needs and goals here. When we last talked, we had a lot of conversation about what our goals and objectives should be. And so we took the feedback we had received from the community at large and some of our committee members. We have an equity stakeholder committee. We have a technical committee. We've got some roundtables set up, and we've been having conversations with lots of different people on kind of a small scale. And so tonight is going to be about reporting out what we've come up with and then provide opportunities for questions and answers and comments to receive some more feedback from y'all. Next slide, please. So transit planning is is what we're working on. The funding stream that we have from Federal Transit Administration, part of the U.S. Department of Transportation, is a planning grant. So that's what we're using it for. Our scope is, as I just explained, and really what we're looking at in the kind of the pre-planning is to really try to define what the project is, excuse me. And then, as you get into more design work, you get to define how, right? So we're worrying about the what right now. So for example, there's not an abandoned railroad corridor in Northwest Atlanta. So we have that in the Southeast and the Southwest and most of the Northeast as well. And so we have those corridors in place, and it's pretty apparent where trail and transit are going to go. In the Northwest, which is the primary focus of this effort, we don't have that abandoned railroad corridor. So we're having to do some alternatives analysis to try to figure out how we can get, generally speaking, from Bankhead up to Lindbergh. And so that's really the focus of what we're doing and what we're going to be talking about tonight. It's going to be alignments and station locations. At some point within the next several months, we will have some ridership projections. We'll have a service plan from which to base those ridership projections, and we'll start to develop some cost estimates too. Now, these are going to be very high level analyses, just based upon where we are in the process. Next slide, please. And then just to make sure everybody kind of understands the roles of our partners that we have, kind of like we have, the Beltline Arboretum, and we have Trees Atlanta as our Arboretum partner, or we have the Path Foundation as one of our trail partners, or we have private developers that are helping us out with our housing program. We have our transit partners here. MARTA is our regional transit authority. They are the entity responsible for design, construction, implementation, operations, and ownership. And in terms of the more MARTA half-penny sales tax, they control that revenue stream. They receive it directly. The city of Atlanta, of course, is the representative entity that stood up the Atlanta Beltline program of projects. And they're the ones that kind of represent the population, the citizenry of the city of Atlanta. And then Beltline, it's our program to, as Nate walked through the Beltline 101, we have transit as one of our foundational elements that we are obligated to deliver. And so with our partners, we're working towards that with this study, excuse me. Next slide, please. So Beltline wide, we have our equity priorities, which we've talked about a little bit at a very high level, but more detailed, again, we're trying to make sure that regardless of where you are in the city around the Beltline, that geographically you have access and mobility opportunities to participate, not just access for purposes of transportation, but access for purposes of economics. And to make sure that all the community voices around the Beltline loop are heard from, that the culture, character of the different communities are not only enhanced, but are not only preserved, but enhanced as well. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide, which is going to focus on the transit equity priorities. And so first and foremost, we've learned a lot as we've gone through the first 15 years-ish of Atlanta Beltline, almost 20 at this point. And, displacement of existing long-term residents is really something that we've been working on. And we've got several programs for that, but that's one of the elements that we're looking at specific to this transit study. We're also looking at, kind of how can we stimulate some growth and development in communities that have been historically underinvested, and make sure that those community voices are part of the decision making and feed into that decision making on the front side. Next slide, please. So in terms of the overall arc of this study, we started it about a year ago. We're in fall of 2024 right now, so you can see that we're working towards service framework and ridership and those analyses. What we're going to be talking about tonight is the alignment. Uh, we call it alignment refinement because it rhymes nicely. um, but we're looking at the alternatives analysis for the Northwest quadrant, and then we're going to be looking at station locations, stop locations in all three quadrants. Ultimately, our contract with our consultant team expires at the end of June of this coming year in 2025. So we will be trying to wrap up as much as we can within this year and then into the beginning of next year, ultimately closing the project out and having final recommendations hopefully well before June. Next slide, please. So we're going to start off with just a couple polling questions. Hopefully this is going to go smoothly because I have not done the polling question before, but here we go. If we can hit that first poll, please. So the first question that we want to ask and get some feedback from everybody is, how do you plan to use future transit on the Atlanta Beltline when it becomes available? And this is a multiple choice. It's very similar to the first round of polling questions. How do you use the Beltline? But this is specific to future transit. How would you use future transit on the Beltline corridor? Would it be commuting to work or school? Would it be running errands and shopping? Would it be accessing parks, trails, and rec centers? Would it be connecting to other transit such as MARTA bus or MARTA rail? Or the last opportunity is the last question or response, excuse me, is I do not envision using transit. What I cannot see is the number of people that have responded. So I'll look to either Nate or
We have about 100 of 131 responses.
okay, well that's a pretty solid response. So why don't we close out poll 6 and let's see how we did. Thank you. So in terms of it being a multiple choice question, the percentages are not going to add up. But I will tell you that running errands and shopping, accessing parks and trails, and connecting to MARTA were almost tied for first place. There's a lot of people that are looking at commuting to school or work, and there's just a couple people that do not envision using transit on the Beltline. So let's get on to, I think we've got one more question here, one more poll question. Thank you. So the next question is poll number 7 is, how likely are you to use future transit on the Atlanta Beltline? And this is a single choice question, very likely, somewhat likely, not very likely, or very unlikely. And then when we get to around 110, 100-ish, responses, let's close it down and get
We're
there.
there. We're at 112 of 132.
Perfect. Let's see what we got. So the vast majority, 84% of the responses are very likely to use, followed by somewhat likely, and just a couple people are not very likely or very unlikely to use transit on the Beltline. So appreciate that kind of as just a sense as to where we are within the room. And I think those were the only 2 poll questions, so we can get back into it. So here comes the presentation with respect to the Northwest Beltline quadrant in terms of transit and the different alternatives that we've been working towards. So with the next slide, excuse me. Again, focusing in the Northwest quadrant, generally speaking, between Bankhead and Lindbergh. And the star up in the top right corner is a proposal for an infill station at around Armor Yard. So that would be a new MARTA station on the existing red gold line in between Art Center Station and Lindbergh Station. And it could, if this is something that we can bring to fruition, it could provide some service in an area that doesn't currently have really anything. And so I don't want to dwell on that too hard, but this all comes from the State of the City address when Mayor Dickens announced some infill stations along the MARTA system as part of that State of the City this past spring. So there's still a lot of work to be done on that, but wanted to make sure that we were carrying that concept forward within our work. You can see that there is no, well, you can't see it, but there is no abandoned railroad here. So even though CSX and Norfolk Southern have corridors, they are both active corridors with their freight rail system. We've got crossings of I-75. There is the MARTA station existing down at the Bankhead station. And there's a lot of different communities and land uses throughout this study area. For context, the green squiggly line that works its way around is the alignment that we have chosen and are working on design and construction. That is the Northwest Trail associated with the Beltline. Next slide, please. So our goals and objectives, which we've tried to, some of them are quantifiable, some of them are only qualitative, but we're really trying to figure out how we can do transit on the Beltline that provides that frequent and reliable connectivity and transit to link up people and commerce. We want to do this in as sustainable a manner as possible, as opposed to, continuing to rely solely on internal combustion engines and private vehicles. This is really intended to make sure that we're bringing everybody along for this investment. The equity inclusion elements of this are some guiding underlying principles here. And then this is a more technical element of it, but implementation and operations is just to make sure that we're not proposing something that just doesn't make sense from a transit operations perspective. Next slide, please. So this is an amazingly complex graphic that doesn't really say too much, but what we're doing is really, this is trying to just give you a sense as to where we are, what we're doing, and where we're trying to get to. And so we've had the idea of transit on the Beltline. We have a US DOT record of decision from several years ago, I think it was 2012, where we picked a technology and we picked a general alignment, the Beltline loop, right? And so now what we're doing is we're doing some alternative analysis to try to fill in some of the holes that were intentionally left at that time. It was a tier 1 document. And we're not doing tier 2 analyses yet, but we're starting to identify what would go into the tier 2 analyses. And that's what the alternatives analysis is, which is why we're looking for an alignment in the Northwest. And then ultimately, when we find that alignment and we can get some level of agreement to it, and we can consider that a locally preferred alternative, then we can get into the environmental work that needs to follow and move towards project implementation. So on the next slide, we're going to start talking a little bit in the weeds here. And I know that this is going to be impossible to read, especially if you're looking at this on your phone. But this presentation will be made available as a slide deck, but also I think on our YouTube page or something, where you'll be able to go back and listen to this presentation and go through and read the details of it. But you can see that we have, in the Northwest quadrant, we've tried to break up the quadrant into 3 separate sections. So we have a west segment and a series of segments in the west, which are identified as W1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the central segment, we have, I think, 8 different segments, which C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for central. And then on the east, we have E1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the reason we did this was so that we could identify a bunch of different alternatives. We ended up with 18 total. And then, we could do some criteria-based analysis of these different segments. So we weren't trying to take a huge bite of the entire 5-ish miles of Northwest. We broke it down into smaller segments. And so the gray squiggles that you see there dividing the west from the central and the central from the east, those are just boundary conditions. that will be hopefully a little bit more apparent when we get farther into the presentation. So with those 18 segments, we identified 9 criteria that they were all kind of reviewed against. And so the next slide is going to show us how each one of these did in terms of a qualitative and relative kind of basis. And so, for example, on the West, we had W1, 2, 3, 4, 5 coming across the top. And then the criteria are the different rows compared against. And so you can see, for example, everything that's in this peach tan color, those didn't fare well. Those had poor ratings or a fatal flaw. Now, a couple of them, based upon the criteria, for example, the top one there, connections to MARTA high capacity transit. The central segments are not going to have any connectivity to the MARTA heavy rail because we already know where those are. And so we couldn't just knock off all of the central segments that we had. We had to carry some stuff through, even if it had a poor rating, because we needed that for connectivity. So some of the other criteria that were looked at was trail network connectivity, activity center connectivity, affordable housing connectivity. And then we got into some demographics in terms of transit dependent populations. We also had engineering feasibility. You know, if a corridor is too steep for a vehicle, then that becomes a fatal flaw, for example. So on to the next slide. What came out of this was 2 in the West floated to the top, 3 in the East floated to the top, and then we have the connectivity between West and East through the central segment. And these are still segment based, but on the next slide, what you can see is we took those segments and combined them into logical corridors that took the essence of the segment and then blended through the boundary condition to get to a point where we have 5 different alternative corridors that we're going to be looking at. And so I'll walk you through those now, if we can hit the next slide. Okay, so I'm sorry. What this slide shows is kind of what the initial segment or the segments that we analyzed that floated to the top and then how they became the corridor analysis, the corridor alternatives. Next slide, please. So in the Northwest, we have some station areas here that are corridor specific, right? So as the corridor changes from, you know, alternative 1, for example, in red, which generally speaking follows the CSX corridor, you know, those station locations aren't necessarily applicable to alternative 5, which you see coming through Atlantic Station. So these station areas are, you know, screened out, identified based upon zoning, population density, the social vulnerability, the connectivity to bike and ped infrastructure, and you know, access to activity centers, major destinations. Next slide, please. So this is just a zoom in, so I hope you can see it a little bit better of all the 5 alternatives within the Northwest. And now I think I'm going to be able to walk you through the different alternatives. If you can hit the next slide, please. Yeah, so in this slide here, we're focusing in on alternative 1, which I said, generally speaking, follows the CSX corridor. So generally from Bankhead, we're in street within Marietta Boulevard, and then get up to Huff Road and come across, and then we start to follow CSX. And we're in the CSX corridor underneath I-75 over the top of Northside Drive. The big activity center that we're trying to hit with this corridor is Piedmont Hospital and the Shepherd Center up in the quadrant there at Peachtree Street. And then ultimately get over towards, in this case, we have it shown as the infill station at Armour, but could, I don't want to say just as easily, but for the purposes of planning, we might be able to carry that all the way up to Lindbergh. And then we show it coming back south again to tie into the northeast quadrant. On the next slide, we're going to look at the two, this is numbers 2 and 4, the light blue and the purple. Again, Marietta Boulevard coming up, and then coming across and, excuse me, getting into what is generally the Norfolk Southern corridor until we get to a point where the two alternatives split, generally speaking, near the Amtrak station at Peachtree Street, where one corridor, the blue one, alternative 2, follows Peachtree north towards Piedmont Hospital and then gets in the CSX corridor and continues up to Armour and Lindbergh. And the purple corridor, alternative 4, continues, generally speaking, along Norfolk Southern, serves the Armour-Otley area before it gets up to the MARTA heavy rail stations. And the next slide is going to be looking at alternatives 3 and 5, which run concurrently. Again, coming up Marietta Boulevard, coming cross town, a little bit of Norfolk Southern, but then it gets into the street network of Atlantic Station and uses 16th Street to come up and then ultimately get towards the Norfolk Southern corridor on the north and east side of I-75 and running along 85. And again, getting up into the Armour-Otley area after the split. So one of them would run up Peachtree towards Piedmont Hospital, and one would just run through Armour-Otley. Next slide. If we can hit that next slide, please. Thank you. So that is a very quick explanation of what's going on in the Northwest quadrant. We do have a lot of work that's still to do. These corridors, we have our ridership estimates that we're going to be doing. We have our capital cost estimates and our operation costs. If we can go back for 1 second. Well, anyways, we have a lot more work to do, but what we're going to do right now is, because I've given you a fire hydrant's worth of information, we're going to start a Q&A session here based upon just the Northwest quadrant before we get to the next technical part of this meeting. So Nate, if you want to MC this thing.
Yeah, Sean, thank you so much. All right, so this is the point where you can start putting stuff in the Q&A, but let me talk to you all about sort of the setup here for this. We're going to answer as many questions as time permits. In this first section, we'll probably take about 5 to 10 minutes. We're probably not going to get to all the questions here, but we'll have a second section later in the agenda. So if you're on the phone and you'd like to speak, hit *9 on your telephone keypad. This is going to raise your hand. A member of the team will open your line when it's your turn, and your phone will prompt you to press *6 to unmute yourself. Online attendees, if you can submit your questions now in the Q&A box, that'd be great. In addition, you can upvote a response by clicking on the thumbs up icon. You can also raise your hand, but we will prioritize those who are on the phone since they're not able to participate in the Q&A. And if you're on Facebook Live, please feel free to participate in the comments section, and someone in our staff will try to address your question. If not, they'll elevate it to the larger group. Given the number of attendees, 142, we are going to focus on the Beltline Transit Study, not on the Streetcar East Extension, not on other aspects of the the Beltline project as a whole. All right, so first question, if you can clarify what you mean by how soon can we get it? It's the first question from Beverly. I'm going to look at, is Georgia Tech, okay, Sean, is Georgia Tech's expansion into the Science Square being considered in evaluating the route alternatives?
We have, I think we're going to be a lot farther west than my understanding of where Science Square is, which is east of Northside Drive at North Avenue area. So no, that's not to say that there isn't other transit that could make that connectivity, but the alignments that we're looking at for Beltline Transit are farther west than that. And I think what Beverly was getting at, if just because she typed in so quickly, was when would we expect to see transit on the Beltline? Right now, the first project that is to deliver transit on the Beltline is that streetcar east extension. And MARTA is telling us that that's a 2028, 2029 revenue service date where they start carrying customers. So that's the soonest. Right now, that is the only project within the tier one project list of the More MARTA program. So anything after that, in terms of tier two funding, remains to be seen in terms of where the program, would have the funding available. That's not to say that there isn't more funding that can't be sought to try to make the pie bigger, but right now what we're looking at for the quadrants within the Beltline Transit Study are going to be long range planning.
Why was a connection between Atlantic Station and Art Center Station not considered in the final 5 alternatives, even if E3 was marked as a viable segment option?
It's not off the table, and it's a great opportunity for additional routes for overall network and city service and whatnot. But in terms of it being, the best thing for the Beltline and the context and the purpose and need of what we're trying to get at, we didn't think that was the best. Now, like I said, it's not off the table. If, for example, we can't get a land deal in the future with Norfolk Southern or CSX, then there would have to be some other way to try to make that connectivity back across the city to tie in the Northwest into MARTA high capacity transit if we can't get to Lindbergh through the Northwest quadrant. So great question.
I'm going to the top of the queue here with Jim's question. I think he's talking about transit, but he does mention the Silver Comet. Are you concurrently thinking of in designing the transportation to the river and to the Silver Comet and the connection to Cobb DOT? I think that's
so, Cobb DOT has some transit referendums that are coming up, as does Gwinnett, outside of both of them outside of the MARTA service area and outside of the city of Atlanta. We have trail connectivity that we're working with through Path Foundation and tangentially with Cobb County for connecting the Comet to the Beltline. But from a public transportation, from a transit perspective, we're really trying to focus on our loop right now. And then the bigger network of the city of Atlanta with the More MARTA program.
Great, thank you. All right, so it's from Charleston. For the alignments along Peachtree Road, like alignment 2, will GDOT permit dedicated lanes for rail?
So that's a great question because it would be wonderful to have that. Whether that ends up being the case or not is to be seen. We need to get to a point where we have a little bit more information to have those conversations and to have some basis for that. For prioritizing transit, dedicated lanes would absolutely make the most sense. And that gets us, highest ridership, most reliable service, all of the reasons to do it. But it is a very constrained corridor with a lot of demand on it already for transportation. So we don't know yet is the short answer to that question.
Thanks, Sean. We're going to go ahead and take a potential question here from Claire Reeves. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. I was just kind of wanting to throw out, I really appreciate the polling, and I really want to say that thank you so much for doing this meeting. It's very valuable, and I am very much pro transit on the Beltline. But I felt like the polling questions earlier were a little bit loaded, where it's like, would you like to have transit on the Beltline or not? It's more about like the areas in which they're supposed to be put. I'm wondering if we could just maybe at a future date, like have a little bit more of a discussion, more detailed, versus saying, yes, you like this, no, you don't like it, because we definitely in my area do not like some of the streetcar expansion things, and I don't want to get into that much. But we feel like there are better solutions other than that. Can you help us get a little bit better of a polling situation in the future?
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. Towards the end, well, I guess we can steal the thunder now. We don't have it ready for prime time, but there will be a large public survey that will be posted to our website, and we'll announce it, um, whether it happens next week or the week after. We're not sure exactly yet. Just trying to get this thing combined with our new website and all. Um, so give us some pay. We appreciate your patience, but know that there will be a large format survey about transit on the Beltline forthcoming.
All right, we're gonna hit one, maybe two more questions, and then we're gonna move on. Um, Next question is, one of MARTA's heavy rail current weaknesses is that it's set up for commuters, and those patterns have obviously changed. How much are you weighing regular service that hits non-office locations?
Well,
Oops.
one of the strengths of streetcar, especially in the context of Beltline, is it tends to promote more of a corridor development situation than nodal. And um, as sorry, my phone just rang. Um, so in addition to corridor development, it also is really set up so that it's not just going to focus on kind of a 9 to 5 crowd and a commute in from outside. What we're trying to serve is new activity centers. We're trying to serve new developments and provide that connectivity back and forth between the MARTA system and make it a much more thorough coverage and still have that frequency. And so, the MARTA heavy rail spines are absolutely wonderful because, you know, you can't do much with just a spine, but you can't do anything without it. So when you have that major spine and then you've got the workhorse of local bus, and we start to fill in that kind of middle layer of transit between um, the mobility of the heavy rail and the local access of the local bus system. We fill that in with the streetcar network, with a bus rapid transit network, with an arterial rapid transit network of kind of enhanced bus service, I guess you could call it. That's where we're going to start to see a lot of value added uh, to the city of Atlanta and really start to take advantage of that extra half penny that's getting to MARTA. So hopefully that answers your question.
Right, we're gonna take one more quick one. Just for clarification, are the alternatives ranked in any way or the numbers arbitrary?
The numbers are arbitrary right now. There's no implicit ranking intended. We could have called them by Muppet names, but that would have just got us laughed out of the room. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but there is no prioritization within that.
All right, Sean, before you move to the next section, I'm going to ask members of the Beltline and technical and consultant technical team if there are any easy, quick questions that you can answer in the Q&A. Please feel free to do so. If not, we'll leave the rest of the questions in the Q&A and they'll be mixed in at the end. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Nate. So next slide should be our cover slide for talking about, yep, Southwest and Southeast. So this part of the corridor, the bottom half of the Beltline, if you will, we already own the land. Now, there might be needs for a little bit more to be acquired, but that's to be seen for the most part. We already own the land, and we have a pretty decent idea as to where transit will be going. We know that there are some pinch points along the way, which we're looking at, but one of the things that we really want to talk about is station locations within the footprint of the Southwest and the Southeast. So next slide, please. And for those curious, that rendering there was under Burn Street and Grant Park. There have been a lot of station locations identified, potential station locations over the course of time for Beltline Transit. And you can see the 26 of them here, which, 14 in the Southeast, 12 in the Southwest. They end up having, they end up being really close together, which means that you're stopping with the train very quickly. And it takes a lot longer in terms of travel time to get a larger distance because there are so many stops along the way. And so the conventional wisdom, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, has been shifting to where we are right now, which is we have a trail network, which and a physical trail, which is a wonderful connector. So it collects people and it can distribute people to Beltline transit stations, so that we don't have to have stations located every 1,500 feet or something like that. That's just too much in terms of travel time. So as we go through this, you'll get a sense as to hopefully you'll get a sense as to what we're trying to achieve here as we move more towards kind of a mobility, but knowing that we have the access because we have the trail. So next slide, please. So here in the Southwest, we've got a couple different potential stations that we've identified, and you can see that, and we'll go through some more slides to show how we're moving this along. But we've done some work up through 2017 previously, where these were the stations that were identified, where we'd already filtered out some of the previous, I think we had 12 here originally. So this also includes the potential infill station at Joe Boone. Again, this would be halfway, or not halfway, but it would be between the Ashby MARTA station at MLK and Lowry, and then up to the Bankhead station along Hollowell Parkway. This would be a new station along the existing MARTA Proctor Creek spur that would be, linked in directly with the Beltline as well. So it becomes really convenient to make that connection there. And these other stop locations identified, you can see the infill station at Murphy Crossing down at the bottom of the screen as well. I think we kind of flubbed it a little bit where we put that icon. It should be right on top of that intersection of the Beltline and MARTA. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so over here, we haven't done that work yet that we had done in 2017 with the Beltline over here on the Southeast. So there's a lot more stations identified here. This is not necessarily what's going forward, but we're just kind of zooming in to show what the potentials are here. So again, the Murphy Avenue and the infill MARTA station there, over, towards McDonough Boulevard and ultimately up to Glenwood Avenue. Next slide, please. As we are trying to, similar to the alternatives analysis for the Northwest and identifying criteria and then kind of running these performance measures by station location, you can just get a sense as to what we're trying to achieve in terms of connectivity, sustainability, equity, and inclusion, as well as transit operations. So these are just examples that are not all of the performance measures that and the metrics that we're measuring against, but just a good sampling of them. Connectivity to transit, bike and ped connectivity and accessibility, um, affordable housing connections, and then talking about, ridership potential. So next slide, please. And I'll apologize now for the lag. Thank you. What we're looking at here is access to affordable housing. So the circles in yellow are Beltline specific. So these are projects that Beltline has some sort of investment in, whether we're doing it ourselves or have a partner. And then the bigger the circle is the larger number of units. And then in purple are affordable units, that are not being done by Atlanta Beltline Inc., but are being done by our affordable housing partners, whether it's Atlanta Housing Authority or even some private developers that are doing affordable units. So what we're trying to show here is, identify where the affordable units are and then figure out where the station locations that can best serve them. Next slide, please. Thank you. Another slide here is showing based on, land use. So it's the same criteria that just the colors are specific to the quadrant. So the pinkish color is southwest and the tannish color is southeast. But these are kind of large parcels that are susceptible to redevelopment, at least as we see it. And so again, identifying station locations based upon, opportunities for redevelopment and additional affordable housing and additional affordable commercial space, and more neighborhood serving type of land uses. Next slide, please. So here we have connectivity. So we've got some different transit in addition to the Beltline shown in the existing MARTA heavy rail. So you can see the existing streetcar, and then in the dash blue is the proposed Summerhill BRT, which is under construction right now, which basically runs Hank Aaron up into downtown. So from the McDonough Boulevard stop location, right? The red dashed line coming up through Metropolitan is the Metropolitan Arterial Rapid Transit, which is a kind of an enhanced bus system service. And then you can also see the potential bus rapid transit coming up the Campbellton Road corridor into the Oakland City MARTA station. So what we're trying to do is identify the other transit projects that are funded and make sure that we are, finding the stations closest to those for that connectivity, in addition to the infill stations that we've identified as well. Next slide, please. The future land use here, again, in terms of density, the darker the purple, the more density potential there is. So we're looking at this and again, trying to identify station locations that could potentially serve that density. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but the buffer areas, the outer buffer area there is a half mile and the inner dashed circle buffer area is a quarter mile. So it gets you kind of a sense as to scale and distance here. Next slide, please. So with all said and done, this is what our proposal is based upon the screening that we've done, is to have these station locations along the southwest Beltline quadrant and that transit service linking up Murphy Avenue and the infill MARTA station. We're proposing one at Lawton Street, at RDA, at Anoda Park, at MLK, at Joe Boone with the infill MARTA station, and then up to Hollowell Parkway and have access there as well. So that's what our draft station locations are, and there's some more information I'm going to present here, but Q&A and tell us what you think. Next slide, please. And then over in the southeast, very similarly, you can see the Lawton Street from the southwest, the Murphy infill station, Metropolitan, Pryor Road, Milton Avenue, Hill Street, Boulevard, and then Glenwood. So, and we'll have a couple more slides in here that hopefully give you, again, a sense of scale and distance in between them. So next slide, please. Here we go, the travel sheds. So what we're proposing is that 7 of the 12 original stop locations be carried forward. The largest distance between the stations is 3/4 of a mile. Instead of doing one at Langhorne and Lucille, we kind of split the difference and proposed to put one at Anoda Park, which we have an upcoming construction project there. And then ultimately, for, I guess, the disclaimer here is this is a very high level analysis. We are not necessarily trying to locate a station to the foot. So what we're looking at is just a generalized location, and then future planning and engineering will identify, if it's on one side of the street or the other, if it's a center platform, if it's a side platform. Those are the next level details that will come. And then the next slide will give us a sense as on the southeast, again, seven stop locations, 7 platforms, 7 stations out of the original 14. The biggest difference here, distance here is between Glenwood and Boulevard. There's a great trail that we're under construction with right now that will link those two together. So the outer circles that you see here are a half mile, and the inner circles that you see are a 1/4 mile. And so really, when you look at it from Boulevard to Glenwood, they're not quite a mile apart, which means that the worst case scenario is you're a half mile away, which a lot of people can do that in a 10 to 15 minute walk. So that's using the trail for that access to the transit system. And then outside of that, in the purple, I guess I should have explained that, is the purple is a 1.5 mile bike shed. So if you're on bicycle, instead of, you'll be able to go farther on a bicycle than you would on foot in the same amount of time. And so what we tried to do here is get a sense as to what the biking distances would be to get to these stop locations, these station areas, as opposed to just walking. And then the next slide. So this is just so you can see it more of a system and a network on the southwest and southeast, that we end up with a pretty solid cadence of stops as you go around the Beltline, whether it's east to west or west to east. So that is our proposal, and we look forward to some great feedback from you guys. I think we'll get into some polling questions now. So if we can launch that next poll, which of the draft Southwest Station locations provide the greatest community and mobility benefits? Now, this is a multiple choice question. So we have the locations identified: Metropolitan Parkway, Pryor Road, Milton Ave. This is the southeast poll, number 9. We need the southwest. Although, if you skip the PowerPoint to the next one, we can line.
We can go back to poll 8, Ebony. Just so we line this up.
Yeah, I want that map in the background as we do. So if we can go to the southwest, station locations while we take poll 8. That way we have the map in the background. And if your poll pop-up is blocking your map, then feel free to move it to the side on your screen. Can you go back one slide? I think there we go. So again, in the Southwest, which stations do you believe provide the greatest community and mobility benefits? That would be Hollowell Parkway, Joe Boone Boulevard, MLK Drive, Anoda Park, RDA Boulevard, Lawton Street, Murphy Avenue, or do you have a perspective of other where you believe we've missed the mark a little bit? And just let me know when we get to, if we got 130, if we can get to 110 or so. And this is multiple choice. So it's not like you have to pick your favorite child. You can pick 1 or 2, even 3 if you wanted to. How are we doing on the polling? Are we coming up on 100, 110?
86. So we've slowed down. I think we might want to lock it in there, Sean.
Yeah, let's go ahead and lock that in. Maybe the next one I'll hum the theme to Jeopardy so everybody knows how much time they have left. So in terms of a response, Murphy Avenue is the one that has come up with the most responses. Hollowell Parkway, Joe Boone, and RDA have all about the same number of responses as well. And then Anoda Park was less than Lawton Street, and there was one other in terms of response. So thank you for the feedback. And if we can get on to the next PowerPoint slide with the poll number 9 in the Southeast. So it's generally the same question, except it's Southeast specific. Which of the draft Southeast station locations provide the greatest community and mobility benefits? Metropolitan Parkway, Pryor Road, Milton Ave, Hill Street, Boulevard, Glenwood Avenue, or other. So let's see if we can at least hit 90 to 100 responses on this. And nobody wants to hear me hum the Jeopardy theme.
90.
Okay, let's lock it in there then. So in terms of the responses to the highest number of responses were at Glenwood and then Boulevard and then Metropolitan, with Pryor Road, Hill Street, and Milton Ave all coming at around the same amount. And we had a lot more people that have a other perspective. So look forward to hearing about that in the Q&A as well. So we can close down that poll and hit the next PowerPoint slide, please. So we have done, and we will continue to engage the community on this, the whole Beltline Transit Study. We have done some pop-ups, Atlanta Streets Alive, been up at Atlantic Station. We have, and I mentioned this earlier, we've got an equity stakeholder committee. We have a technical stakeholder committee. We have these other roundtable discussions, which are small group discussions. And then ultimately, we're probably going to be doing a a meeting specific to the Northwest because there's so much information here that I had to kind of fly through. But for the Northwest quadrant and community up there, we can do a specific study group meeting to allow them to dive into the details. Because really what we're doing is we're defining where the Beltline is up in the Northwest, whereas we know where it already is in the Southwest and the Southeast. Next slide, please. And so, as I alluded to earlier, there will be a survey that's coming up, and it will be published on our Beltline website. This is one of those bit.ly addresses to get to it really quickly. ABI, Beltline Transit Study, Atlanta Beltline Inc., Beltline Transit Study, ABI BTS. So you'll be able to find that page pretty fast, but we'll be putting out whether it be a press release or a blast email or however we end up deciding to do it, we'll have, I'm sure, a link in that as well. So Nate, correct me if I'm wrong, but if people registered for the meeting tonight, then they would be automatically on the list to receive that through that email address.
Right, yeah, so we'll send out the survey and the presentation once the survey is up and ready to go to anyone who has attended or even registered and didn't attend this meeting, as well as the rest of our subscriber list. So is that your last slide before our next little section of Q&A here?
I believe so, but I may have flaked
Let's
on
find
the
out.
next slide.
Yeah.
Hit the next slide.
Yeah,
Hot take.
you wouldn't flake, Sean. Come on. All right. Brian, I see you. We're gonna go ahead and unmute your line in just a moment. We have some folks who joined us real quick, so let's just talk about how to participate again. Real simple here. We have some phone attendees. You're welcome to raise your hand by hitting *9 on your telephone keypad. Once it's your turn, a member of our team will kind of take away the block, and you'll be able to hit *6 and unmute yourself. If you're online on the Zoom platform, you can put stuff in the Q&A box, questions and comments. You can upvote, and so on and so forth. You can also raise your hand, but we're going to prioritize, for the most part, our phone attendees. Facebook Live, you can participate in the comments section. I heard that's already happening. We have a member of our staff who's monitoring that. And we're going to take as many questions as time permits. We're not going to get through all these questions with 126 plus attendees and 38 in the queue already. So for whatever questions and comments we don't get to, we'll go ahead and in the coming weeks create a Q&A document with all those answers for you all. Thank you for your patience in advance. So, Brian, what's your question or comment?
Hi, yes, good evening. Thank you for inviting us tonight for this good meeting. I know what it is, but just in case if the community don't know, what's an infill station and what it's supposed to do? Because, you know, I know it's supposed to connect to my research. It connects multiple modes. But for the community at large, what is an infill station?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. As I said, the infill station proposal from Mayor Dickens was to create more connectivity between the Beltline corridor and the existing MARTA heavy rail system. And so, for example, between West End Station and Oakland City Station, the Beltline crosses about halfway in between those two stations. And there is not a station there now for the MARTA heavy rail. So the proposal would be that along the MARTA heavy rail and their existing guideway, that a new MARTA station be installed, again, halfway in between West End and Oakland City, so that there would be a new stop created where people could get on and off the train and link directly with the Beltline, and also provide, more MARTA access to that community as well. So that is the purpose of the infill station and what it is. Thanks, Brian.
All right, thanks, Sean. I'm going to work from the bottom of the queue just to give you a little
More
heads up.
Southeast.
Yeah, I want to make sure we get to some of the Southeast and Southwest here. Let's go with, and let's go ahead and stay on infill for just a second here, Sean. So this is from Alan. Many of these proposed routes assumed that the infill stations would be built. were any other alternatives assessed that are more focused on the existing infrastructure?
Yes, and so as in, any good improv, yes, and um, the proposals that we have out for comment tonight are not fully baked final decisions. What we have here is from the analyses that we've done that we think that there's some value to the infill stations, whether that is to minimize impacts or to maximize connectivity, uh, or to provide a solution that would cost significantly more in a different location. So, for example, the Joe Boone infill station, our our alignment with trail and transit align immediately adjacent to uh, where a station could go at Joe Boone on the existing MARTA line, as opposed to trying to bring transit through Maddox Park to link directly to the Bankhead station as it currently exists. So we thought that that was a pretty good solution there. Similarly, down at Murphy Crossing, we feel like there's a pretty solid solution there as well, as opposed to the amount of cost and impacts of coming out. And honestly, it's not just cost impacts and community impacts, it's also um, um, time impacts for riders to come out of Beltline corridor to get down to the Oakland City MARTA station. That's a good little clip to do that. And so from a Murphy Crossing perspective, that made a lot of sense. I think that the one up at Armour is probably, just being perfectly honest with you, is the one that is a decent balance between two things. There's a lot of guideway savings that happens if you have an infill station at Armour, because you don't have to build guideway all the way up to Lindbergh. But connecting all the way up to Lindbergh helps serve a much larger portion um, of the Atlanta community, especially with access to, Buford Highway, for example. That's a much better access point for that type of transit. And, for an infill station at Armour, it would probably be a relatively small station without a whole lot of development because it's surrounded by railroads, three, CSX, Norfolk Southern, and MARTA, and that MARTA rail yard that they have. And then it's on Peachtree Creek too. So there's some give and take there in terms of the value of infill at Armour versus going all the way up to Lindbergh. We think it weighs a little bit more towards Armour, which is why we're proposing it, but that's why we're also presenting it so that we can get that feedback. Hopefully that answers your question, and maybe a couple others.
Speaking of a couple others, there's quite a few in here, and there's some really robust dialogue that I'm reading and getting distracted with. Sean, I cleared a couple some advocacy efforts for Delmar. That's really what I'm trying to say. Why is Delmar not in the mix? Is kind of the theme on some of this.
Yeah, again, it's the proposal is, out there for the purposes of having this conversation and this discussion. Part of the reason that Delmar didn't float to the top was because it is relatively low density. And it the likelihood for that density to increase is relatively low because Grant Park and Ormwood Park are pretty well established communities that we don't see massive redevelopment of, the neighborhood homes going in that direction. And so from Delmar, it provides great access for the community, but it also, the counter is that it costs the system travel time. And so that's kind of that give and take of us trying to kind of cull down 14 stop locations to 7. So maybe 8 is the real correct answer, as opposed to the 7 we're proposing, whereas other people might think, you only need 6. So that's what we're doing tonight, is to get that kind of feedback.
Is that, so I have another question, and
Shoot.
is this the question of the answer you just gave? Why is there such a large distance between the Boulevard and Goodwood Park stations? Is that the,
That's basically it. And we acknowledge that there are two trestle tree apartment complexes within that space, and it's absolutely not to ignore that need. But again, we do feel like with the trail there and the two access points that we are constructing now, that that those access points get to the transit and use the trail to maximize the mobility of the transit system by using the trail for the access.
all right, we're with Anthony here. This is Pittsburgh Yards. And there's a few other folks who echoed this, but it seems like a big missed opportunity to not have a station at Pittsburgh Yards. The Beltline has a plan to redevelop a piece of land there along with the future potential for Pittsburgh Yards. Metropolitan and University there does not have future development ideas, but has a station.
Yeah, one of the difficulties with Pittsburgh Yard is the vertical differential between the elevation change between the floor elevation of Pittsburgh Yard and the elevation of the transit bench, the transit guideway, as it comes from Metropolitan. And so when you look at it from the perspective of providing a ramp system to get to a transit stop at Pittsburgh Yard, you're already most of the way up the hill back towards Metropolitan. And so instead of having that stop and having all of that ramp system, the thought was just, walk another 100 feet or so, and you're going to be at that transit stop at Metropolitan. So the topography change at Pittsburgh Yard is really what was kind of setting us to work in that direction, and to not necessarily have a station at Pittsburgh Yard proper, but the access from Pittsburgh Yard using the trail to get to Metropolitan would be, it would be we could call it a Metropolitan / Pittsburgh Yard station. That's really where the basis of that is.
All right, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if you need me to pick one and answer it, I can do that, but I wasn't sure if you're okay. My problem is I haven't been participating in the conversation.
It's fine. I did have one queued up, but I just lost it. Not like we don't have any shortage of selection here, but all right, I think I found it. This is Nathan here. So I mean, we're kind of back to this Glenwood and Boulevard thing, but just specifically, Nathan talks about the gap a little bit, and the lack of a stop at United prevents easy access to two low-income housing communities, and makes it a long walk to the elementary schools for most of Ormond Park and Grant Park. So he's actually advocating that we restore at least one of the stations, ideally United. So that's more of a comment.
Yep.
There's advocacy for Milton, by the way. I saw that in a couple comments.
Okay.
There's a question here from Matt. Are distances measured as a crow flies or by using streets?
So the circles are in the imagery, the circles are quarter-mile circles and half-mile circles. So that's all by way of crow. For the 1.5 mile bicycle purple clouds on those travel sheds, I'd have to go back and look, but just I'm guessing, because they're not perfect circles, that they are making use of street network to get that 1.5 miles.
Okay. Is there a graphic that shows existing and future population density with the proposed stations for the Southwest and Southeast alignments, also retail and commercial nodes? And for the audience, if you just kind of explain what a node is.
Sure. So the concept of the node is, kind of an area of development intensity that is greater than that around it. So like a commercial center, um, like Westview, for example, at Ralph David Abernathy and Lucille Ave. There's downtown, if you will, downtown Westview, where they have a lot of or a little bit of commercial density at the Slutty Vegan in that area. But outside of that, you're at a relatively low density of the single family housing of that community. So that's the node, the retail node at Westview. In terms of residential density or commercial density, we can get that and provide it. We don't have it as part of this slide deck, but we have it citywide, so we can make that available. It's in other transit presentations that I've done. We're just really focused on the southeast southwest corridor as opposed to the entire city of Atlanta.
Well, Sean, I did my best to get through and combine as many questions as possible, but as expected, we were left with 37 unanswered questions and many times just comments. So we will be, to the audience now, we will be compiling these. These do take some time to compile and to make sure we have the right answers. And some of the ones that I didn't ask required additional resources as well. So bear with us. That is something that we will post on our website at beltline.org/meetings. We're going to go ahead and close things out here. We're cutting a little bit close. That was our last question. So we're going to do a little polling to get us out the door here. And let's be a couple questions here for you. So was the information tonight presented, was it helpful? This quick yes or no. We still got about 114 participants on the line. Let's see. All right, well, really coming in quickly here. All right, and in the interest of time, I'm going to cut it off at about now 65% of participants participating. Turned out to be about 70. And for the most part, folks are saying, yeah, well, it was helpful, Sean. A couple folks said no. So again, if we could throw that in the chat, engage@atlbeltline.org. We want to know how this could be presented in a more helpful way. We're always looking to improve our process. One more question here for y'all. Did you learn something new? So that should pop up in your screen. Here we go. Let the races begin here. All right, we are at 68, pushing 75% participation. Seeing that the pace has slowed, we'll lock it in there at 75%. We got 78 people said they learned something new. Nobody said no. And we had about 3 individuals who said they need more clarity. Again, engage@atlbeltline.org. We want to hear from you. This is not a one-time meeting. This is a continual process. We're always looking to improve our methods and the way that we convey this information, and also just to hear your feedback. So thank you for participating in those polls. As we get this thing closed out, a little more information for you. The project manager, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, his name is Sean Green. You've heard a lot from him tonight. And I swear, Sean, every time I look at your image on the screen, I see that you're in a MARTA car with like the 2 poles. And I don't know if anyone sees that, but it just seems so fitting, or maybe transit's on my mind, right? We've mentioned the email address several times. It's in the chat. We just put our project website in the chat. It's bit.ly, the bit.ly. And I lost the rest of it. It's in the chat though for you. It's also on the screen. Yeah, there it is. bit.ly/ABIBTS. It's Atlanta Beltline Inc. Beltline Transit Study. The survey is coming. Bear with us. We want to get it right. This is complex information to convey, and we want to make sure that we're messaging it correctly with all these different options so that we can provide you all with an opportunity to give us and share with us the best feedback and engagement possible. So stay tuned. You will receive that. You will receive a copy of the presentation. That takes us to about 7:59. We've enjoyed meeting with you all, having a conversation. We hope you continue to stay engaged. This process is certainly far from complete. And I guess that's about it. I see 8 o'clock. So
Yeah.
thank you so
Thanks for
much.
your time, guys. Appreciate it. And team, thank you so much. Appreciate all the help.
See you on the Beltline.
Catch you guys later. Be safe out there.